It is 4 o'clock. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our event on the future of energy. I'm very happy to see so many of you here today. Actually, a lot of people. I'm very excited today. We're going to have an interactive talk. So it's not going to be a guest lecture or anything like that. It's an interactive talk. And I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Prins. I am a lecturer at European Studies, and I will be your moderator today. We are joined by two very special guests who will introduce themselves in a minute. So today we're going to talk about the topic of energy, which is a very topical issue. As I'm sure you've been keeping track of the news, and you see, for example, relations between countries affect where we get or governments get energy from, what type of energy they get. It leads to decisions on, are we going to replace our current energy sources for more greener, sustainable alternatives? We can talk about that today. Also in the Netherlands, this is a very topical issue. I'm sure you haven't missed out on the news that there have been blockages of the A12 motorway here in The Hague, organized by Extinction Rebellion. And I think 27 days there have been of blocking the motorway. Over 9,000 arrests, including some is one of them, our speaker. And this has now led to the government, or at least a parliament, asking the government to phase out of the fossil fuel subsidies. So that's actually quite a big change for the Netherlands, and that's why it's so important that we talk about these issues today. So our event on the future of energy is part of the Week of Sustainability, which my colleague will tell you more about. After I'm done talking, our colleague from the Green Office, Lucita, will tell you about the week, but also about the importance of dialogue, and also how she got to invite our guests, Sam and Jeremy, who will then introduce themselves. Maybe you can already share a little bit about your view on the future of energy, maybe your role in it as well. And then we're going to talk. And then we're going to have 3 dialogue starters, and we will ask you about your opinion on these issues. And then around 5 o'clock, we will wrap up, and then there will be drinks. Sounds good? All right. That being said, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Lucita.
So, really pleased about how many people are here at the moment. My name is Lucita Kotegestal. I'm a lecturer at Management and Organization. I also work as the coordinator of the Green Office. I started the Green Office. And the Green Office is a student and staff platform for just a platform to get to know each other and help out with your sustainable ideas. So we're trying to push this university into a more sustainable direction, and therefore we are critical about policy, but we also try to nudge and connect people, because we have a lot of people here inside these beautiful walls with knowledge on and perspectives on things. And we also have critical students and students that want to participate and help out. And one of my student assistants, Jennifer, came up with the name of Jeremy. I don't know if Jennifer's here. No, she might be coming in. Jennifer is one of the student assistants, and she said, I came up with this name, Jeremy Bentham. He was a former strategic scenario in Shell, and I think it's really interesting to invite him for our Sustainability Week. His view, his point of view, but also, is this gonna change within that company? And I thought, okay, this might be interesting, but that's one point of view, and I really want another strong point of view on the whole thing and the whole matter, because we are a university. We're not here to just explain one side of it. We are here to look at things and see different perspectives, and that's how Sam came in my timeline on LinkedIn. She left her job to fully put all her attention and energy in activism for Extinction Rebellion. I thought, well, that might be interesting, getting those two people together. We had some talks previous to this moment, and it was interesting and I learned a lot just by exchanging ideas. And I think that's really important, and I hope that you will participate and also see your own roles in this case, because it's not one side or the other side. I think we're all in it together. And it's also not easy to make everyday decisions. I took the car, for example, this morning. And I really need to talk about it afterwards with the drinks. I hope you enjoyed the talk. And if you want to know more about the Green Office, come up to me. And there are some flyers. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lucita. All right, then I think we should get to our guests. Maybe some of you would like to introduce yourself first.
I was thinking Jeremy would go first, actually.
Oh,
if you don't mind.
I don't mind. But
all right,
that's just fine. Hello, everybody. I'm Jeremy. As you can see, I'm from a different generation than yourselves. But I apologise to the people up here who can see my bald head at the back. That is apologies. And also that I have to have a couple of notes just to remind me who I am. So I'm really pleased to be here, really because I love The Hague. I even like rain at times. And also I really, really like to promote education, higher education. I feel it's very important. You're at an Academy of Applied Sciences. I was an applied scientist. I've been in the energy industry for some 40 years. I retired from corporate executive life last year. And I'm currently doing a number of things, basically being a senior advisor or board member of the World Energy Council, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, with an international women's health NGO called Pathfinder International. I do things with Singapore University. But the basic overarching theme is promoting a better life for people with a healthy planet. That's the background to it. Like Sam, I want to accelerate transformation in the energy system. I've worked for more than 2 decades on that. I was the early chief executive of Shell Hydrogen, and then I moved into the area of leading the Shell scenarios and Shell strategic thinking about scenarios and scenario future. So I've been grappling with these matters of environment and energy for actually more than 2 decades, hence the white beard and the greying hair that's there. Why did I join? Well, basically, I joined the industry because I was an applied scientist and I needed a job. And that's a good enough reason for doing that. But also, it seemed pretty cool because there are all these dramas on television like The Power Game, which made international energy seem an exciting area to be in. But also, I had the sense that it was kind of important, because it was in the news all the time, but also because basically, you can't operate or build or move anything without using energy. So our basic lives are powered by energy. And even the way we eat our food, behind each calorie of food that we consume, on average, is 5 calories of commercial energy. Behind beef, it's like 40 calories as a very different scale that's there. And so, we live in a world that has seen many changes, and energy is one of the things that has been changing and will continue to change. It has to change urgently. There are 3 times as many people on the planet now as when I was born. There's 8 times as much productive activity in the world as when I was born, and we use almost 5 times as much energy as when I was born. So there's a lot that's going on. And these different energies that there are in the world have actually layered on top of each other. So we're actually using more dung and peat and wood now than we were before the Industrial Revolution. So that on top of that came coal, on top of that came oil, on top of that came gas. And we're looking at a need to urgently decarbonize the economy, not by adding something on top of it, but substituting those fossil energies. And if there's something to take away from this little session, think of that word substitute. So kind of, what have I learned in this? Well, first of all, the importance of energy. On average here in Europe, we use, forgive the nerdy language, 150 gigajoules per person per year of energy. And that's equivalent to having 150 servants working for you. And so that's why we live a quality of life that was only available to kings and queens centuries ago. People in America actually use twice as much. There's a lot of room for efficiency changes, but you actually need up to about 100 in order to have a decent quality of life, in order to have the productive activity. And there are billions in the world that don't have that yet. And so we mustn't adopt a Western-centric view on energy and energy use. We have to recognize that energy use will grow and we have to substitute fossils. So the second element is around that substitution. And there are 5 technical aspects to that. One is efficiency. 2 is electrifying the economy. Currently, only a fifth of the economy is electrified. It needs to be almost 2/3. Most of that electrification has to come through solar and wind and nuclear. We have to replace molecules because you still need molecules for portable, high energy density areas. We have to replace oil molecules with biofuels. We have to replace gas molecules with hydrogen or hydrogen-related fuels. And we have to mop up things through removing carbon dioxide, either by natural or technical means from the atmosphere. So these are all technical things. And as applied scientists, those are things that you can get really involved in. So that's a good thing. But also, thirdly, we have to recognize that there have been successes, and we have to learn from those. We have to learn from the fact that when you join up the dots, things can happen. Most people don't appreciate that just 8 value chains contribute to more than 50% of emissions. So that's things like clothes. There are jeans hanging outside there. Food, cars, construction, banking, professional services, electronics, your computers. These are all high emissions value chains, and they can be changed. And to have a sustainable pair of jeans would only cost you an extra €5 over a normal pair of jeans. It's a modest increase in cost. It's how do you connect that revenue back into making the big upstream investments in new synthetics or better growing of things. So those are some of the things. I'm getting the side. So I'll wrap up by this saying then, finally, because you are such an important part of your life, I just wanted to give you a few suggestions. So the first is you are students at this academy, learn, join the dots with these supply chains and the things that you do. Secondly, you're citizens. Vote for smart policies, get involved in protest movements that can raise attention to areas and use that attention well. Thirdly, your consumers, get involved not only in your own choices, but consumer movements to have low emissions computers, to have low emissions jeans. And finally, as you move into your career as professionals, you can help not only in a narrow energy sense, but wherever you work, you can reach out and look at the supply chains where you're working and align the stars so that those can be decarbonized. So there's 4 things that I think you can do.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. I think a lot of the points that you raised might actually also come up during the dialogue again. Sure. Also, for example, what your individual contribution can be. So very good. Thank you. Now, Sam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Sam Schwencke, and I'm currently a full-time climate activist. But before that, I actually studied right here. So it's good to be back. I studied spatial development, climate and management right here for about 4.5 years, which really had a focus on climate issues in the urban environment. So it's insulating of homes, the energy transition, but also public transport, water management, the government's role in this. It's very broad and really made me see a lot of different places and perspectives. I graduated with an assignment at the municipality of The Hague on ecosystem services, which talks about all the services that ecosystems do for us that are really hard to calculate. So if you have a tree in your street, then that is a different revenue to having that be a parking spot. The parking spot is very easy to attach a number to, but the tree, I mean, it's nicer to grow up there. Maybe your real estate value goes up. Maybe you have less health issues if the tree is there, but how do you calculate that? It's not really as stable a number as with a parking spot. So I did research on how the municipality can incorporate that sort of stuff in their policy decisions. And when I graduated on that, they hired me to be on their green department, and I then went to their sustainability department, where I worked to give lectures to colleagues internally within the municipality on different climate subjects. And when the IPCC reports of 2021 came out, I worked on basically transposing those reports to the situation of the city, because those are worldwide reports. But what does that say about the risks for infrastructure right here? So it turns out that, for example, the hospital Haagse, if there's high rainfall, which we can expect more frequently, the road could get so clogged with water that an ambulance wouldn't go through, which is a real issue at a hospital. So the municipality wants to know that sort of stuff. And I helped work on that. And so at my work, I had to read these IPCC reports on the state of the climate, and they got me really worried. I thought, okay, so if the municipality is not prepared to have these ambulances get to the hospital when there's a flood, what are we gonna do? And when you have that climate anxiety, it gets really difficult to just type your policy reports right there in the office. So I wanted to basically shout it from the rooftops, and that's when I got into Extinction Rebellion, and they gave me a megaphone and I could shout it, and that was wonderful for my mental health. And so I combined my work as a municipal employee with my activism. I also used civil disobedience as a tactic in my activism, and so civil disobedience is a technique deeply rooted in history, such as the civil rights movement in the US. Rosa Parks is the most classic example. And I really love that example because I don't see myself as being Rosa Parks, but I can somewhat liken myself to one of the thousands of people around Rosa Parks who also boycotted the buses and got themselves arrested. It's still different, of course, because they were in way more dangerous situations. But it's a beautiful technique to create social change. And as it's been mentioned, those sorts of pressures can be really effective. And we've now seen legislative change, and I'm really proud of the fruits of our labor in that sense. But so I was combining pretty regularly breaking the law within demonstrations with my municipal work, and in February of this year, that blew up in my face. So the summary of that situation is that I was at a road blockade that was not the A12, it was a different thing. And I got recognized in pictures, and the local politics had an opinion on that. A local politician on Twitter called for to get me fired. And I almost did get fired, but to keep my job, I had to sign some of my demonstration rights away to prevent that it wouldn't happen again. It was a whole legal thing. I won't bore you with the details. I'm now an expert on the gedragscode and all those sorts of workings. But basically for a few months, I had my job, but I didn't have as many demonstration rights as all of you have. And so I felt awful, and I didn't want the job anymore. So I quit out of principle, and that was really freeing and really wonderful. So now I'm a full-time activist, and I love the stereotype of being an unemployed activist. So I live off of my own savings, and I was really able to dive into the A12 campaign. So I've been arrested on the A12 exactly 10 times, and yesterday did the action at the Rabobank in Utrecht, which was really fun because we were in the bicycle group. We made a bicycle blockade to block their parking. It was a lot of fun. I'd recommend it. So that's my role in this whole situation, and I'm not an energy expert to the extent that Jeremy is, but I have a bit of the background through my studies. And of course, I follow policy changes very closely. And what I see a lot in activism is that people are, some people are very nihilistic, saying it's all already too late and what can I do? And my part is so small. And maybe you recognize that feeling. And then there's people who say, we're going to find a technological fix, and so much is already happening. We'll be okay because we're smart and we can fix it. And in both those situations, you don't have to do anything, because either we're all doomed and there's nothing you can do, or it's going to all turn out okay. Other people are working on it. And in the middle of that is a gray area where you're worried enough, but you're not confident enough either. And that's where we do action. And it's beautiful to do that within your work and within activism. And I loved combining those two things for exactly that reason, to really maximize. I'm all done with the metaphor of your carbon footprint. I don't like it, but you have your handprint. And I really like handprint because that's where you have agency and you can make choices. And that's what I loved when I got approached for this panel. I thought, you guys are searching for what your role can be from the things that you're studying now and the choices you have in life. I'm a bit closer to your age than Jeremy. I'm 25. And so I relate, and I think we can have wonderful conversations about that.
Hey, thank you, Sam. All right. Those are actually some of the things that we're going to discuss now. So how it works, we're going to have dialogue starters. We're going to have 3 of those, and we're going to talk about those until about 5 o'clock. These sentences are formulated in an extreme way so that it's easier for you to disagree or to agree with. So if you want to speak, raise your hand and then the microphone will come to you. Obviously, we're going to let people say what they want to say. We don't interrupt each other. We stay respectful, right? If you disagree, great. Actually, it's good to hear different opinions. We're not going to attack anyone verbally, especially not physically, okay? Just disagreements are great as long as we stay respectful. Okay, so let's see. We're speaking in English. If you feel more comfortable saying something in Dutch, that's okay. We can translate it. That's fine too. Other languages, I'm not so sure. Maybe we can try. The point is kind of to listen to each other, maybe learn from people who you agree with, or maybe even who you disagree with. Learning about the other side's arguments is always a good thing. And that being said, I would like to ask you a question first. So please raise your hand if you do something in your daily life with the environment in mind. Do you change something in your lifestyle? If so, please raise your hand. Okay, that's a lot of people. I would like to hear some examples of what you do in your daily life. Who would like to say something? Who would like to start? Lucita, what do you do?
I just want to say hi, but I do. I get in a place of anxiety and worry, and what can I do? And try to make it small. But one of the things is reducing my meat consumption. And I can immediately look at my nutrition and dietetics colleagues that will say, we'll have to measure if it's actually reduced. But just buying vegetarian stuff and
Do we have more people who do this? Raise your hand. Okay, do we have some full-on vegetarians here? Do we have vegans? Okay, 1. Okay, good to know. Are there maybe people who reduce taking the plane, for example? Yeah?
No plane?
Maybe even reduce the times that you take the car as well? Yeah, do you take the bike or public transports? Okay, very good. So this relates actually to our first dialogue starter. There has been a lot of discussion about even shaming people. Should you criticize people for, I don't know, drinking from plastic bottles, going on holidays? Or is it not shaming, but just calling people out for responsibility? Is it a good thing to do, or is it a bad thing because you disagree, or is it a bad thing because you think it takes the attention away from other actors? That is what we're asking you about now. The first dialogue starter is: citizens must take individual responsibility for climate change by drastically changing their lifestyles. I'm sure you have opinions on this. Who would like to share?
I think for a certain extent, definitely. I think we all have a choice to make and that can like influence the climate in a better way. But I do feel like, for example, the government should enable that choice. It shouldn't be that it's more expensive to take a train to Paris than a plane. Because for some people, we cannot make that decision because of our financial state.
That's what I think.
Thank you. So the government should make it more accessible for people to choose greener options, for example. Okay, good. What do others think? You agree with this? You disagree?
I would disagree that citizens must take individual responsibility, because mostly your choices are based on the system that you're in, where you really don't have a choice to do better. In a supermarket, you can try to take the best product, taking the environment in mind, but it's really hard to pick a good product. It's just not there. So it could be a government responsibility or a corporate responsibility, but it's really a system that you're stuck in, and as an individual, you can't change that.
System is the problem. Okay, not, or should become...
The system is there.
Okay. Yes. Okay, good. We have a hand here too, by the way. Our guests can also join. Yes? Jeremy?
Oh,
He was first.
Sorry, please, yep.
I'm going to, I'd like to agree with this statement initially and disagree with what our colleague said. The system obviously is a problem, but if nobody's going to create the demand to change that system by making the individual changes themselves or calling for the ability to make those individual changes, the system's never going to change. So if we don't create the demand for that change, the change will never happen. So we'll be stuck where we are. So I'll have to agree that citizens must take the individual responsibility for what they do, but that is limited. Earlier on in the introduction to the dialogue starter, you mentioned shaming people for some of their choices, but I completely disagree with that. As we said, we live in a system where we can't always do it, but we must encourage people to make the changes in a positive way, not by shaming them into doing it. So thank you.
Very good. So when the individuals want this, there will be a demand, and then maybe the companies and the government might also change it based on that demand. Okay, good. Jeremy?
Yeah, and just really building on a couple of those things, I think that point that Sam made on agency is really important. So we have individual agency, but as individuals, we have collective agency. You can choose to be part of an activist movement. You can choose to actually be part of a consumer movement, and I'd like to see more of that, because indeed, if you show that there's a demand, for instance, for green aluminium because your laptop has got a dirty aluminium casing, enough people saying we demand that, commercially people will react to that. So I think there are ways to be agents, not only individually, because there are those ways, but also collectively through being involved in either citizens' movements or consumer movements.
Yeah, and so I talked a bit already about how I don't like the idea of a carbon footprint, and to really solve it through consumer ways like that, because I feel like it really takes the attention away from the responsibility of big companies. If I'm responsible for my footprint, then big companies are responsible for their footprints, and they're way bigger. So yeah, I don't eat meat and I don't fly and all those things, and that's all great. I encourage everyone to keep doing that. But my mom's not been buying plastic grocery bags since the 70s, and it only really started to become a less used product when the government made it law that it costs 5 cents now. Now suddenly everyone's bringing their own bags to the grocery store. It was still a great impact that my mom had all those years. It saved a lot of bags, but the big impact is when we all decide as a society through lawmaking and through company regulations that we don't accept certain types of pollution anymore. And what I really love in the core principles of Extinction Rebellion is because we have 10 core principles that have really helped me with, for example, my climate anxiety, because one of them is no blaming, no shaming, which means that within the movement, if you're at a protest and you see your action buddy and you think, I have not seen you for so long, how have you been? And they say, oh yeah, because I was flying to Thailand. Don't then go like, why are you flying? We're protesting against the KLM right now. Like, that's a hypocritical thing. Like, yeah, but what if there's family there and there's no other way to get there? And we can fight about it. Maybe it was a luxury thing and you might have opinions on it, but let's not infight, because that takes the attention away of the fact that the system is shaped in this way, and that we all have personal choices to make, and you can use a product and still also fight against the way that the product is made. I'm guessing none of you are wearing your clothes like, I wear this shirt to promote child labor. Like, we can wear these clothes while still being against the way that it's produced, right? No blaming, no shaming.
Okay, some very good points being mentioned. We have a bell here, by the way, to indicate that we don't have forever for every dialogue starter, unfortunately. So we have 2 more to go. So that being said, a lot of you talked about changing the system. So now I want to talk about how fast, and is that realistic or not? And the second dialogue starter is about whether this is a realistic change to be made, because often we have this discussion and we say, it's very urgent, we need change now. But some people say, well, you can want to change, but the demand, right, is not there yet. We are still way too dependent on our current energy sources. People are dependent also in terms of their jobs. And that's why the second dialogue starter is, the transition to renewable energy sources is economically unrealistic and will lead to job losses. What do you think of this?
Yeah, I think maybe it will create other jobs. So it will lead to job losses, but there will also become new jobs. I don't know what Jeremy's opinions about on that, but that's what I think.
Can I give a quick opinion? Being involved in either myself or promoting lots of macroeconomic studies, and the macroeconomic drag is small. But indeed, there are then shifts between sectors. And so indeed, jobs decline in some areas and grow in others. But the overall macroeconomic cost is modest. And in fact, the cost to the consumer can be modest, as I mentioned. An extra few euros on a pair of jeans. That may be big for somebody. So that's, again, not coming back to this shaming thing. But it's about aligning the stars, and that's difficult. With all the scenarios that I read and understood and was involved in, what I found is I can look back, because I've been doing it for 20 years, and a lot of techno-economic things happen at quite a pace once they happen, but it's the socio-political that drags it. What happened in Paris in beginning of 2016, end of 2015, could have happened in Copenhagen in 2009, but didn't. So we are slow socio-politically, but then that's our collective choice. So you can get involved in some of those movements we spoke about to really try and accelerate that, I believe, anyway. Thanks.
Okay. Do you think that we can change like tomorrow?
Well,
Bit ambitious.
any car that you buy now is going to be on the road still somewhere, probably in sub-Saharan Africa in 20 years. So things in that sense have a timeline. So it takes changes. But we can make choices now that impact the next 5, 10, 15 years. And we can do it. It's just about technically feasible to make the ambitions of the Paris Agreement. But, it's tough socio-politically because there will be people, some who feel that they are losers and some that feel like they're winners. And we collectively have to deal with that. If I can just give one example, I come from an energy background without realizing it until later in life that I was the first generation in my family, male, who didn't work down a coal mine. My dad, my granddad, my great-grandfather all worked down coal mines. I'm glad the coal industry is basically gone in England, but the way that it was destroyed has left scars for the next generation, the next decade. The way that it was politically destroyed in the 80s was awful. You can contrast that to the kinds of things that they're trying to do in Germany, where they're trying to manage that in a fairer way, that transition. And so the choices we make and the way we implement them, I think, are important.
Very good. So it's not completely unrealistic.
But not from an economic point of view.
Okay. Other people's opinions on this? Yeah, we have someone in the back.
I don't think it's unrealistic at all. And building on what Jeremy just said, I'm from the United States. And in West Virginia, there's many, many coal mines. And I remember under the Obama administration, they were trying to close down those coal mines because it's not viable anymore. But they did invest in having a lot of sun panels and factories built in West Virginia to compensate for those job losses. And if I go back to when I first started my career, and I'm going way back, I used to work in Boston, and one of my first jobs was to work for an energy, it was called a community energy company, where I went door to door to try and let people know how they can use low-flow shower heads and back then compact fluorescent lights. And the idea there was very much driven by the government. Basically, the energy power plant in Massachusetts was told you cannot build a new power plant. You have to spend as much money as you would have to build a new power plant in investing in the communities to make them more energy efficient. And they did that for the whole city of Boston. And this is like 25 years ago. So, and it created tons of jobs, not just for myself, but for the people that were installing all of this and reinstalling things in the homes. So I definitely think it's realistic to actually have a positive economic impact by changing things.
Okay, that's a very good perspective. But the question is also, can these people normally that lose their jobs also get those new jobs? And if that's the case, like you explained, then that would actually not be that unrealistic. Okay.
Investment and retraining.
Okay, good. Other people's view. Maybe there's someone who disagrees with this or not.
Well, yes, I also disagree to this statement, because you are saying that that renewable energy is economically unviable. But for example, in the Netherlands, there is I want to take electric cars as example, because at the moment electric cars are more expensive to drive, just because electricity in the Netherlands is expensive, because the tax system is in the way that it makes electricity, the factories that produce electricity are funded by the government, and that's the way they keep up electricity prices. And I think when governments not invest in those factories, that it will lead to sustainable electricity produced, mainly also on the shores of the Netherlands, which we already have through the wind farms and the solar panels, I think that's also important, and that when you replace the people to that part, that a lot of that you have that a lot of jobs also can be created that you can produce electricity in a renewable way.
Okay, so we need the government for that.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Someone else would like to share their opinion.
Well, I think even if it would be true that job losses would be the case, then I wouldn't care.
Yeah?
I think the survival of the human race is more important than some jobs.
And the planet, right? Okay, clear opinion. Thank you. Oh, all right. One more short view on this.
I would jump on the example for the electric vehicle and thus using renewable energy sources. But I would take a step back further, and I would say that by substituting to that type of transportation, for example, which is more renewable, let's say, we have some negative part as well. We give like, for example, for the mining and producing electric batteries, you need lithium and cobalt, which are one of the main sources for water pollution, air pollution, and mining in general. So at the same time, while we're thinking we're doing something good, and this is the promoting trend, at the other side, there's a negative as well. And we have to, let's say, find out if this cost is actually a good choice to make.
Okay, thank you. So the alternative is also not perfect, per se, you're saying. Okay, very good. We've talked a lot about government action, but we also know that the government doesn't act in a vacuum and decides, just not ignoring the public. So we have civil society influencing government decisions like Extinction Rebellion. We have NGOs, we have Greenpeace, for example, but we also have multinational companies who influence decision making, and that is what our last dialogue story is about, because we see that often multinational companies, especially in the fossil fuel industry, take a lead in this, and some people say, well, that's a good thing because they're the ones who can bring about change. Others say, well, it's not great because they prioritize their shareholders, for example, and their profit over the environment. So I'd like to hear what you think of this. Yes, we have an opinion here.
So I will completely agree with the statement, and I'd like to look forward a little bit. If we look forward to COP28 in November, that's being held in the United Arab Emirates, the president of COP28 is, as far as I recall, the CEO of an oil company or a fossil fuel company. I can't remember exactly which type. How is a conference supposing to bring governments together to solve the climate crisis going to work if the president of it is a fossil fuel CEO? That is directly counterproductive to his prime job, his interests. So I'm going to have to agree, the fossil fuel industry, as an industry that is incompatible with the idea of a just transition to a sustainable future, yes, they should be involved in the discussion, but they should not be the sole people in that discussion, and they should not be in charge of who speaks, when they speak, and controlling that discussion. So yes, play a part, but don't control it. Step aside.
Hey, very clear. Jeremy wants to respond.
Yeah, no. First of all, I agree with that point. That they have to be involved, but they shouldn't be the center. And in fact, when I worked in Shell, a big multinational company, and you'd be surprised how little people listen to us in government. But you can get a seat at the table. you can get a seat at the table. Whereas, say with the COP, I think it's ADNOC, but that's basically a wing of the UAE government, just as Saudi Aramco is a wing of the Saudi government. So there's all those kind of aspects. But a lot of the the majors are not affiliated with the government, but with knowledge, you can get to the table. So I was fortunate that I worked with the policy wing of the Chinese State Council for a dozen years, and it kind of influenced the Chinese State Council to have industrial policy to say we are going to manufacture the world's solar panels. And ultimately for the world, that's a good thing. And so having, if you like, technical knowledge as input, I think is really valuable. Having commercial is very different. And so I had to make sure that nobody from the commercial side of Shell, there's like a Chinese wall, was involved in any of those discussions with a government.
So very curious what Sam's opinion is on this.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you guys helped bring solar panels to the Chinese government, but of course the main operation of Shell is in fossil fuels, and so I think it's dangerous almost to have these parties at the table, because yes, they have a lot of knowledge on energy and the infrastructure that's currently powering our world, but either they shift away from fossil fuels entirely and then they can participate in the future, or they keep with fossil fuels and can go die in that scenario. Shell's very welcome to keep existing, but only if they're not going to harm us anymore, And so what we've seen with a lot of policy decisions is that they're heavily influenced by fossil fuel companies, such as right now we're going to do carbon capture and storage under the North Sea. Risky project because the North Sea has quite an ecosystem. But we're going to storage carbon capture and storage CO2 emissions there, and that's to offset mainly Shell, but also some other companies' emissions. And the government pays for that, so that's our taxpayer money. And I'm thinking, why don't these companies fund it themselves? Shell made $40 billion last year. Couldn't they have just made that project without us paying for their mess to clean up? And that's due to lobbying, because they convinced the government that they couldn't possibly pay it because otherwise the shareholders would get mad and the economy would be in pain. Jeremy has opinions on this, but thank you for letting me speak.
No, but it's other.
And I love the example of COP as well, because at COP27 there were over 600 fossil fuel lobbyists present at these tables. Why? It's an international conference of the parties, and companies are not parties in that situation. So, yeah.
Okay, so first action from these companies, and then maybe they can have a seat at the table.
If they can be clean, they can talk about it. As long as they're dirty, get out of those talks.
Okay.
But unfortunately, the world is going to go through a transition, and the big companies are going to go through a transition, as you'd expect. I mean,
I would love
was
for
the
them
CEO of Shell Hydrogen in 2003, but nobody wanted hydrogen fuel cell cars then. Shell Solar was founded in 1999, but Shell was rubbish at making solar panels, so got out of it. So that there are these things. So we can agree to disagree, but I don't think you can say they can get out entirely. I think they have to say that the world is transitioning, and it would be good to see these companies at the front edge of that.
Yes, and so far we've not seen them do that. And that's what I find the real shame, because I hear, especially also in the past few months with the fossil subsidies debate, that people say we can't just suddenly, immediately get rid of fossil fuel subsidies. And we're like, yeah, duh. We're not asking for that. You should have done it 30 years ago. And in 2009, you promised to do it in 2020. It's 3 years later. When's it happening? So with all these stuff, I would love for these fossil companies to be the front runners in sustainability. It's just that for the past decades, they've not lived up to that. I would love the greenwashing to be true, but for as long as it's not, let's not give them a seat at the table.
Okay. I would like to hear your views.
I'm no longer a spokesman for Shell, so I won't defend that at all. I will say that having been on the inside, I know the amount of change that is ongoing and has been since, as I say, the early 2000s.
What do we think about this?
I'm just wondering, so I'm thinking companies that fossil fuel have too much power, probably, but I'm also, when I look at this, I'm also thinking what's in it for the government. So if you would say hypothetically, you get rid of all the oil companies, right? And you start looking at governments per se. I mean, you have good governments and bad governments. But I do think that most governments, especially when you think in terms of short-termism, usually they get re-elected in 4 years. So every decision you make is kind of playing devil's advocate a little bit, but the decisions that they make are usually designed to get them re-elected 4 years after, sort of, right? So because that's in their interest, especially if you're in power, at the end of the day, this is about power. And I do think to actually think that governments in themselves would then make that change is not necessarily going to happen. I do feel this is a very them against us, thou shalt not. Fossil fuel, sure, yes, we need to get rid of it, I do think, but I also think that, like I said, if you take it out of the equation, what would then happen? Would it then be all kumbaya? Would we then go in the right direction, or are we still thinking, we have to keep our power to ourselves? Things like steward ownership come to mind, where you don't actually think about ownership, but you are more of a caretaker that passes it on. I mean, that whole mindset of a lot of people individually, company or government-wise, do have that tendency, so that them against us seems a bit futile to me.
Okay, interesting. Did we have someone who wanted to enter that? Yeah.
I actually have a question because I'm so very impressed by the Shell strategic team. They're really bright people. For decades, they have plans and designed choices for this company that has been so successful. And also what they did was not just the technical aspect, but the social, political aspect in there that has a lot of influence on society as a whole. So, Mr. Bentham, if I may, you have all this experience. If you look back to the 1980s, 1990s, and the choices that were made within the company, implemented by the started by the strategic team, and working to the 2000s, we're now, and looking forward to, say, 2040. What do you think that a oil company strategic team would be working towards?
Happy to kind of respond to that, because indeed, I know that my predecessors in the strategy area were thinking about and working on climate issues from the late 80s onwards, and indeed made a film about climate issues back in the early 90s. And that was also part of what led to the formation of Shell Wind Energy, which is still going, Shell Solar, which is now a different thing because we're not good at making panels, and Shell Hydrogen. And what we found was a difficulty because there wasn't the demand. The demand is only coming through now. And so as a company, they've struggled in trying to be on the front foot, but getting too far on the front foot and you fall. So getting the thing right. Now, I'm disappointed. I can say this now because I'm retired from Shell, that some of the things that have been done have been either a bit too late because of being burnt early on, or a bit too incremental. But in the Netherlands, I think that you still find that Shell is the biggest investor in what you would call the clean energy area in the Netherlands, because Shell is so big is one aspect of that. And so I'm one of the reasons I felt I could retire was I felt that the ball was rolling sufficiently in the society, because it is a society that is Shell, there's 100,000 people, that it wouldn't roll backwards. We shall see whether Shell will escape the fate of the dodo bird or not. I hope it will, because they're paying my pension.
Does that answer your question? Well, time is up, unfortunately, or maybe luckily, maybe you're thirsty. Okay, let me wrap this up. We've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about our individual responsibility. We talked about the responsibility of companies, about how realistic this is. And actually, I feel like there was like general agreement on that this is quite realistic and that we need this change, right? Since we're all in this together, I don't think we can do it without the government or without each other, without the companies. So yeah, that's why I think it's so important that we're having talks like these today. So firstly, I would like to thank you for participating. You can clap for yourself. Great. Okay. I would also thank the Lighthouse for organizing this. Thank you for the green uppers too. And lastly, thank you to our guests, Sam and Jeremy.
Thank you.
Okay, time for drinks just across the hall at West 75.